This is Quinn from A Curious Wonderful Nature, here today to talk about finding, processing black walnuts for eating and for making ink. I was inspired by watching a really great video by Jesse over at Feral Foraging, and he detailed his method of finding and collecting and cleaning black walnuts. I noticed, however, that he has a nice large space and he has some tools that I do not have. I live in a small apartment, and so I wanted to do a video that was for all of us who may not want to collect hundreds of walnuts, but maybe a few to test out eating and also making ink. The first thing we want to do is to go out and gather some black walnuts. I noticed that there were a few walnuts here and there, but I hadn't noticed a tree. I looked around and looked at the bark of this deeply furrowed brownish tree. As I looked up at this tall tree, I saw yellowed walnut leaves. You can collect walnuts if they're green and brown, or if they're deeply brown and decomposed, but I didn't have gloves, so I didn't do that. I collected a few and continued on my way. I then reached the walnut trees that I'd had my eye on. I noticed them last year, but I was a little late in trying to gather the walnuts. The leaves are actually composed of leaflets. It is a compound leaf, and the smaller leaves are called leaflets. If you look closer at each leaflet, the edge or the margin of the leaf is serrated, and the shape itself is a bit pinnate. It's long. If you turn it around, the color of the leaf is a paler green than the darker green of this leaf, which you can tell is starting to turn yellow. Here is a comparison, and what you will probably find on the tree and on the ground, which is where you're going to find most of the walnuts. They turn this bright yellow, and you really can't miss it. When you see all of these things, you will know you will find walnuts in the leaf litter. The husk that I am squeezing right now, it's hard, but it has a bit of a give. To me, they look like tennis balls. That bright green just stands out on the dirt and also among the leaf litter, so you really can't miss it. I gathered between 30 to 35 and headed back. Here are all the tools that I used for the process of separating and simmering and cleaning all the walnuts. First of all, I covered the surface because it gets messy, and I also put plastic underneath the small table that I have. I have several strainers and I use them, and you'll see how I use them. I got spoons from a dollar store because I don't want to use the spoons that I use with my food. I also have a stainless steel pot. You can use an enamel pot, any pot that will not react. And I also didn't want to use a pot that I was going to cook in. I'm going to put down in the description below. I have listed the websites that I referred to because I didn't follow one method. I took a piece here and a piece there and kind of came up with my own. This is more of an art and not a science completely. I also have jars and alcohol. I got the walnuts home. I put them into 2 bags because I thought I was going to do 2 separate batches, and I didn't. But I put them into 2 bags and I froze them. Then I took them out of the freezer after 2 days. I wanted to kill anything that was possibly inside, and I let them thaw for a couple of hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours. So now I am going to start to separate the husk from the actual walnut. And for the most part, it was fairly easy. Now Jesse over at Feral Foraging has this whole setup where he uses a drill that has a cement mixer attachment, and he places all the walnuts in the bucket, and I don't have all of that, and I don't have a lot, so I'm fine with the hand method I am using right now. There are about 5 that I have a hard time separating, so I'm just going to take a hammer because I don't have a mallet, and I'm just tapping on them a couple of times, like on 4 different sides, and they came apart. Now I have separated the husks from the walnuts. I'm putting the walnuts to the side for now, and I'm going to actually simmer the husks. I poured water over the tops of them. I tried to submerge them as best as I could, and I am ready for the next step. Now it's time to simmer the hulls. Now the hulls have to come to a boil and then simmer for 2 hours. It took 30 minutes before they came to a boil, and then I turned down the heat just so that they could simmer well. As time goes on, the hulls turn brown, the liquid gets darker, and the hulls start to break down. They also have a really strong, earthy, spicy smell, and it permeated the apartment. It's a smell that reminds me of soil, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, all mixed in together. My spouse thought it smelled like a spicy holiday bread. This may not be the scent that you like, so if you can open the window. I'm going to remind you that this may not be the thing to do if you have severe tree nut allergies. After 2 hours of simmering, I took the pot off the stove and let it sit overnight. As the hulls were simmering, I started to clean the walnut shells. I left them sit in the water, and I noticed that several were floating, so I took those out and tossed them. Those were not very good. I ended up tossing about 4 or 5. I was left with about 28. With those, I ended up taking a brush and I scrubbed them. Then after scrubbing them, I put them in more water and I kind of agitated the water for a few minutes. Yeah, I did it by hand, a minute or 2. And then I noticed that they were not as clean as I wanted them to be at the top, so I kind of scrubbed them a little bit more. After that, it was time for me to dry them. I placed them on a cooking sheet, spaced them out, and then put them into the oven at about 100 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I will leave it on the screen just to confirm. I let them dry in the oven for about 2 hours. I kind of checked every 30 minutes whether or not I needed to leave the oven open or not. I have a newer oven that does forced air, so it seemed fine to kind of leave it in without keeping the oven door open. Afterwards, I took the walnuts out and notice how dry they look. They are dry. It's time to leave them. Now I'm going to place these on top of a tall bookcase and I'll let them sit for about 4 weeks. I wanted to compare the English walnut to the black walnut. Notice it's a little bit elongated, the English walnut, and notice the shell of the black walnut, rounder, more ridged. Also, the shell of the black walnut is harder than that of the English walnut. It's the next day, and it's time to put the liquid that has been sitting overnight back on the stove. Notice how much it is broken down. Again, I'm going to get this to boil and then simmer again for 2 hours. After this is simmered, it's time to strain the liquid and get rid of the boiled husks. Now, I'm going to toss the broken down hulls into the trash, and I'm going to strain the liquid as much as I can. Some people use an old t-shirt or old cloth. I have these spoons and a large strainer, so I kind of just pounded that and kind of got as much liquid out as I possibly could. I will also strain that liquid and put that liquid back onto the stove. Now, here is where I made a bit of a mistake. I let this simmer and boil yet again for 2 hours. This is to reduce the liquid. I suggest that you do this for 4 hours. Once this has boiled, for me, 2 hours, I take that liquid and I strain it again. Notice that I do an odd little 3 strainer technique. I just thought of it when I was looking at everything, and I strained that liquid, and then as I poured it into the last jar, I strained it again, and I'm using a funnel and I'm using the medium-sized strainer. It's about 1.2 liters, and I pour alcohol to almost the top. The alcohol is poured in to stop any mold from growing in your liquid. I also read that the alcohol helps for the ink to dry faster on the page. You could also use cloves. It's now time to test the ink. The color is a dark brown or a golden brown, depending on what you use. I have a nib holder, and I have it because I had thoughts of going into calligraphy, but obviously I am not a calligrapher. So I was testing it out, and I like the color a lot. You could also use it in some sort of drawing because using a brush gives it a brown watercolor quality. I think it's a fun project to do. I think it's a fun project to do with kids. If you are just at home and it's cold and you want something to kind of warm up the house or warm up your apartment, you'll have a lot of ink. Why not put them into jars and give them as gifts? Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below. Let me know if you are going to try or you have tried to make walnut ink, or if you've eaten black walnuts that you foraged. Let me know in the comments below. I also want to thank Jessie at Feral Foraging for inspiring me to finally do this project, because I've wanted to do this for several years. Thanks for watching. Be curious, stay wonderful, and bye for now.